Ladies and gentlemen, here is our feature speaker for the evening, Mr. Sam Chu. Thank you.
I teach public speaking, and I was a corporate spokesman for many companies. I'll start off with that. That's a good opener. I actually was a terrible student. I went to Episcopal Academy for the first 7 years of my life, which I loved. I then went away to boarding school in St. George's, Newport, Rhode Island, flunked out of there and went to Avon Old Farms in Connecticut, graduated from there, went to the University of Miami with aspirations of being either a marine biologist or a playboy, transferred from there to Temple University, from whence I graduated in 1965. My voice was my gift. I have said that. Everybody has a gift. I told my public speaking students this at Shipley School. I've taught for many years in addition to being an actor and a corporate spokesperson and whatnot. I spent my life talking my way either into or out of trouble. And I was very good at it in both respects. I remember the teachers used to always say, some of you can probably, oh, there's Tunya Harrison. Where's Tunya Harrison? Tunya Highland? Hi, Tunya. Tunya and Bill Highland. Tunya and I grew up together. You may know where the Harrison estate is over by St. David's Church. That was their property. It was their farm, a beautiful, magnificent farm, not unlike our farm, Ardrossan, which I'm going to talk about tonight with you. No, we weren't Ardrossan, Sam. We were Vayner. Well, I always defer to Ardrossan because it was bigger. But anyway, I went to St. George's, flunked out of there, and then I went out to Hollywood. I had a friend in Chestnut Hill who I was going out for the summer to try my luck at acting in the summer of 1965. I was scheduled to be deployed into the Marines, and I blew out my knee and I couldn't go. And I wanted to go, but I did spend a year as a medic in Newfoundland at the St. Anthony Grenfell Mission, where I was trained as a medic and a surgical scrub, but I simply was not smart enough to get into medical school. But I've had an incredible life. And before I capsulize that in a moment, I just want to thank all of you for coming. I have wonderful family members here, Lisa Bennett Chu Stokes, Margot Barringer, and a dear, wonderful Diana Strawbridge, who a lot of you know. Diana Strawbridge has been responsible, Diana Strawbridge Wister has been responsible for the preservation of tremendous amounts of land here in Philadelphia through conservation with the likes of the Brandywine Trust and so forth. It's so important. Frankly, I'm sad and sort of embarrassed that we, the Chu family, were not able to put our land into perpetuity, because it was a beautiful, beautiful place to grow up. I have such incredibly fond memories. Sorry, but I'm emotional. I'm not Italian, but I do belong to the Italian American Club, and some of our members are here tonight. I encourage you to join. It's a great club. But growing up, which I'm going to talk about with Doug, in Radnor at Vayner was such a privilege and such a joy. For the first 12 years of my life, I grew up over there where the Wyeth laboratories are, where the new Penn Medicine is. By the way, I'm not going there. I've decided, I was going to wear Spanx tonight. You know what Spanx are? Yes. I wore them one time and somebody told me, oh, Sam, you look so thin. And I said, oh, thank you very much. These are these things that hold in your tummy. And then I was at the Y the other day up in Berwyn, the wonderful Cassatt estate, and I was putting on my compression socks, and I was going, oh, God, and this guy said, are you all right? I said, yeah, I can't get these damn socks on. Let me tell you something, old age, well, it's not for sissies. And this is sort of like Antiques Roadshow, although there are a lot of people here, most of whom are much younger than me. I can't believe I'm going to be 80 in August. Unbelievable, but it's been an incredible ride. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's nothing to celebrate. There's so many people here that I love so dearly, that I've known for so long. Years ago, a minister said to me at Episcopal, he said, Sam, because I'm a people person, and I talk to everybody. I told my students at Shipley School when I taught them, get up every morning, get in the shower, soap up, which is important for teenagers, and look up before you get out of the shower and thank your higher power. Whoever it is, just say thank you for this day, because that's all you've got. And then go out about your business and be nice to people. Go up to Wawa, open the door for a lady and say, I love your necklace, or I love your hair is so pretty. You never know who you're gonna meet and what you're gonna learn. And I've spent my whole life, I don't learn from books, I've learned from people. People like yourselves who taught me so much, and I am so grateful for all of the wisdom that has been imparted to me by my ministers at originally, God knows, I don't know if anybody goes there anymore, at St. Martin's Church. That's where I went as a little boy over on King of Prussia Road, a lovely little church. That was kind of part of our family property. And so it's been a great ride. I went out to Hollywood. I only had one phone number in 1965. A friend of mine named John Warner from Chestnut Hill, he said, Sam, you've got to call up a friend of mine if you're going to Hollywood to try and be an actor and a voiceover guy and whatever. I was an announcer. I was one of the first disc jockeys at WRTI. And my son said, Dad, what was your show? And I said, this was my show in 1962 through 65. Good afternoon, this is Sam Chu. Welcome to Cocktails and Candlelight. On WRTI, he said, well, what kind of music did you play? And we played, Mantovani, Gershwin, Rodgers and Hart, all that kind of stuff. My son said, I don't know about that, Dad. Anyway, it was great fun. So Dick Clark, who I did some announcing for, I was one of the last announcers that said, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dick Clark's American Bandstand. And Dick encouraged me to go out, so I went out, and the name that I had was Peter Fonda. Amazingly enough. Gone to Westminster School with a friend of mine. I called him up, and the rest is history. I met everybody, and everybody you can imagine in Hollywood I met. I had a magical career out there. I didn't become a star, but I worked a lot for 40 years. I was on the Bionic Woman. I was on General Hospital. I did about 50 movies, did 2 movies with Stallone. And I'll tell you this quickly, because Sly is from here. I went in, John Landis, who directed Animal House, was the director, and I did a movie called Oscar, which was a comedy that Sly did. And I went into the office at Paramount. I was dressed kind of like this. No, I was in a suit, and I had to look like a lawyer, a Philadelphia lawyer, no less. I could play that. So I went in, and Stallone was sitting over in the corner. He was a little guy. He's not that big, but he's very strong. And John Landis said, I want you to meet Sam Chu, who's also from Philadelphia. And you know what he said? Stallone looked up at me. This is God's truth. He looked up at me. He said, you're from Philadelphia? You're not from my neck of the woods. A guy that looks like you comes down where I live, you get your ass kicked. He was from South Philadelphia. And we became good friends. I did 2 movies with him, which was fabulous. Had just a wonderful time out there. And I was lucky. I schmoozed a lot. I met a lot of people. And I'm the only actor, actually, who ever played, it's a sort of a distinctive thing for me on my credits, I'm the only actor that ever played both Jack and Bobby Kennedy on television. I played Jack Kennedy in a movie called Young Joe the Forgotten Kennedy, opposite Peter Strauss, who played Joe Kennedy Jr., who was killed in the war. And I played Jack Kennedy. And then I played Bobby Kennedy in a movie called Tail Gunner Joe. And let me say on behalf of the Kennedy family that my family did not particularly like the Kennedys. We're Republicans. Well, that's another story. But anyway, and thank you and Jennifer so much for inviting me. I'm humbled, I'm flattered. I have so many people here. Oh, by the way, when I first moved back here 14 years ago, okay, this is a true thing. I bought a house up in Radnor. I wanted to live in Radnor where I grew up, and my cousin Lisa Stokes lives at the top of Radnor and Chester Road, where we had some Chew and Barringer family houses in there, and it's divine. We still have some land in there. And when we moved off the farm, which I'll talk about in a minute, we moved over there. And I moved back here 14 years ago. I'd gotten divorced. I've been married 3 times. I loved all of them. But I have a beautiful lady in my life now. Kendall, would you please stand up? Kendall Wheeler, we can both be. That's Kendall Wheeler, who I adore. Her grandfather, she was from Washington. Oh, this is fun. She's from Washington, D.C., but mostly lives in Palm Beach, Glacier Park, Montana, and Aiken, South Carolina. And so you can see I'm her walker. I'm in love with her. We've been together. If she lived in Upper Darby, I don't know if we'd be together. Anyway, but yeah, just kidding. But she's just a beautiful, wonderful lady. And we've been together for 7 years. And I was thinking, but I haven't gotten the 7-year itch because I realized that at my age, the 7-year itch is scratching a skin cancer. Anyway, I'm glad you're here. I adore you. Now, when I moved back here, the first day I got here, I was sad and depressed. I didn't know where I was going to live. And I went over, by coincidence or not, to my cousin Harrison Clement, who lives over next to where the Drexel Paul place was, across from Cabrini College. And I didn't want to live in a development, for God's sakes. I grew up at Vayner and at Cliveden in Germantown. That was sort of cool. Although Germantown now, listen, the Battle of Germantown, I don't know how many soldiers were killed there, but I guarantee you if you go over to Germantown there are more people killed in a week that were killed, sadly, at the Battle of Germantown. It's a dicey neighborhood. But anyway, I came back here and I was despondent, and I thought, where am I going to live? And I bought this house up in Fox Chapel. I'm sure you all know it, across from Cabrini College, on the corner of Upper Gulf and King of Prussia Road. It's a beautiful little development, and I have a lovely house there. So the first night I got back here, I went out. I said, I'm going to go down to Wayne, where I grew up, and I'm going to go to dinner. And the first restaurant I came to was Margaret Quo's. And Margaret and Warren, God bless you, who I love so much, who are here tonight. It's so heartwarming. They walked in tonight. I walked into that restaurant and I was just forlorn. I didn't have a girl in my life. I was just, what am I going to do? And anyway, so Warren came up and I said, hi, I'm Sam Chu, and I wondered if I could get a table for two. Now, normally if I say Sam Chu, people normally say, well, you don't look Asian. And I always say, well, I'm not, I'm Korean. So it's a very strange name. It's English. But so I said, I'm Sam Chu, and Warren, God bless him, right over here, looked at me and he said, Mr. Chu, I know you. I know your whole family, and I know your whole history. I know about Cliveden, I know about Radnor, I know about, and my God, and we became fast friends the first night back here in Philadelphia, and I love you so much, both you and Margaret. And by the way, you have the best restaurant, the best food in all of Wayne, if not all of Philadelphia. So, a lot of friends here, Cappy Markle, Alvin Markle, whose father was a great World War II veteran and passed away a couple of years ago. A lot of you knew him. John Devereaux, my good friend, and just all of you. Sandy and Elsie McAdoo, my lawyer, Charlie Grace. So I taught at Shipley for 12 years. I started public speaking and debate at Shipley about 14 years ago, and it was a huge success, mainly because I wasn't a very good student in college myself, and I have a lot of empathy for kids, but I wasn't teaching quantum physics or chemistry, both of which I failed. I was teaching public speaking and debate. And sadly, as we know, a lot of the kids today don't really know how to speak. And speaking and communicating, talking and listening, making eye contact is very important for all of us. It's important to go out and engage people and to be nice to people and learn from people. And I think so many of the kids today are so isolated in their basements, texting and emailing and doing these stupid video games. Hopefully we can get away from that and get back to some normalcy at some time. And we, as most of us being of the older generation, have to really make that our mission to bring our children and our grandchildren along in a world that's very tumultuous and not easy to be in. But at any rate, should I mention just quickly about Vayner, or shall I turn it over to you? Yeah, well, I'm going to turn it over to the boss. But
what I had done is I brought up a map that includes kind of where the Chu family was. So why don't you describe how the Chu family got to be in Radnor, and what all they had, and what happened to it.
Well, first of all, I've had numerous times where people, even out in California, I went up to narrate a film one time, and the director was from New York, and he said, oh, Chu, that's an old money name, isn't it? And I said, yeah, old money is no money, and I need this job. And he gave me the job on the spot. And then another time, people have come up and said, oh, you're the oil family. I said, no, it's a similar spelling, but the pews are not the chews. And there's a big difference in our bank balance. So anyway, I was born in August 20th, 1942. And I lived over where, if all of you know, the intersection basically of King of Prussia Road. Well, you all are probably old enough to remember where TV Guide was. Okay, the Chew family, which was basically, as Margot will affirm to it, it was not my grandfather's. My grandfather, I'll be perfectly honest, I never knew. Benjamin Chew, my grandfather, was, I would describe him as sort of a dilettante. I didn't know him, so it's not fair for me to pass judgment on him, but I know that he fancied himself to be a sort of a Theodore Roosevelt, Ernest Hemingway type. He was a great hunter, a great fisherman. He was the second master of the hounds at the Radnor Hunt Club. He was a very impressive man. He was not nice to his boys, meaning my father Sam, my Uncle John Chew, and my Uncle Ben Chew. He was not nice to them. And he didn't have the money. The Chews acquired basically whatever they had through the kindness and generosity of William Penn. I was raised by two ladies, in addition to my mother. My mother was an incredibly beautiful woman, but suffice it to say, she had a problem with the sauce. And you talk about the Battle of Germantown. After a couple of martinis in my house, you never knew what was going to happen. So I was raised basically, and I'm so grateful for this, by not only this sort of mainline, prominent, whatever family, but by my Irish nurse, Nellie Marley, God bless her, who was an Irish immigrant, like a lot of you knew, who came to this country in 1942 and held me in her arms and embraced me and gave me the values that I have today that I think make me a good, decent person. A lot of you can probably identify with that. It was a very treasured thing, my sister and I. And Nellie, I remember used to say to Nellie, what's for dinner when we lived over at Vayner? And she'd say, pig's ass and cabbage, and if you don't like it, you can go to your room. And if you complain about it, I'll hit you upside the head with a shillelagh. I adored her. She got married after I was about 15 years old. She moved to Upper Darby, 440 Kingston Road, with her wonderful husband, who was a bartender, Eddie Marley. And her brother, by the way, Radnor history, her brother, Pete Mimnaugh, Miminaugh, was the foreman of our Ardrossan farm. So I spent my childhood with Eddie and Pete Mimnaugh, the kids, and Lanny McLaughlin, my grandmother's chauffeur's son. We all grew up together with Margot and 8 cousins, and we frolicked and played, and we went all through the barns over at Ardrossan and our place in Vayner, and it was magical times. And by the way, if you don't know about Ardrossan Farm, I urge you to go over there and buy their beef. They sell their own beef over there. We still have some Black Angus over on Ardrossan, and it's a wonderful place. They sell beef there, and you can buy it. So anyway, I was blessed to have been raised by Nellie. And then we moved over to, the property, we sold the property, and I'm sad that we did. I think we all are. But you know what, as people say, it's like our Ardrossan Farm. You know, we had over 300 acres in Radnor. We owned pretty much everything from Archbishop Carroll all the way down to Lancaster Pike. 300 acres. Where the new Penn Med building is, that was the exact location of my grandfather's house, Vayner, which is named after an English something or other. And we had streams and barns, and it was absolutely magical. And then down the street from Archbishop Carroll was Tom Swindell's chicken farm. Most of you aren't old enough to remember that, but Tom Swindell's chicken farm, you know where Belrose is, 333 Belrose? Okay, right at the entrance of King of Prussia and Belrose, there's an old building which is a dentist's office now. That was a market when we were kids. We sold our beef and all of our produce and our milk there. We were a working farm. But my grandmother, when I was born in 1942, I remember my daddy coming home from World War II in 1945, and he came up to our little house. You know where the wall is right down there? If you go around King of Prussia by where what used to be, oh yeah, well that was the wall. So anyway, we had 300 acres. We had gardens, we had horses, we had pigs, we had chickens, we had everything. And everything was horse-drawn. Because Benjamin Chew, my grandfather, he was not a Quaker, but he had Quaker ethics. And he, you know, kind of like the Amish, he did not, even in those days, he didn't want to have anything other than horse-drawn. So I remember when I was a little boy in the 40s and 50s going out and plowing the fields and helping the farmers, you know, in horse-drawn wagons and everything. It was very, very old and archaic and everything. And there were a bunch of houses on the property, which are now Radnor Way. You know where Radnor Way is, by the Radnor Tunnel at the train station? All those little cottages were, there was a guy, a real son of a bitch, named Billy Patterson, who was a good friend of mine. He was a ne'er-do-well, wonderful kid. We all had a lot of fun. But we all lived there. We raised everything. And we had every animal you could imagine. And then what happened was in the late 50s, after World War II, in about 1946 or 48, our grandmother, Margot and Lisi and my grandmother, she was widowed because our grandfather, Benjamin Chew, died basically from too much booze and whatever else. He was an interesting man, but he was out of the picture. She had to move out of the house, Vayner. A lot of you probably remember Vayner. I have a lot of friends that used to go over there and pilfer things out of it because the house sat empty and partially furnished for many years in the late 40s and early 50s. And then eventually it was torn down. And right now where the brand new Penn Medicine buildings are, that was where the house was. And across the street where the parking lot is for the Radnor High School buses and everything, those were all the meadows and the fields, and we had barns and everything, and it was bucolic. It was absolutely beautiful. And then we all moved across the street at the top of Radnor and Chester Road, where Lisa lives now. My father built a house, and Uncle Dick Barringer, Margot's father, and my Aunt Ann built a couple of houses. So we had 3 or 4 houses in there, and they're still in there, and it's very lovely. And so it was just an incredible way of growing up. And my cousin and I, Dick Barringer, who's deceased sadly, but we joined the Cub Scouts. And right across the street here, we had our first meeting at the Radnor Firehouse, and we got kicked out of the Cub Scouts on the first day. He and I and Billy Patterson, because Billy Patterson got a cigarette from somebody, and we were behind the firehouse smoking a cigarette, and we got caught by the Cub Master, and we were tossed out. But anyway, I'm sort of rambling, but I did want to say that we're all connected here. And Radnor to me, I mean, I lived in Santa Barbara, California for 40 years, which is pretty bucolic and really lovely, and the weather's like this all year round. But there's something very special about the main line, and especially special about Radnor and the Radnor Hunt area and Goshen Road. And I often just drive around on weekends, and I still go, I reminisce about the old days. I'll drive over the Ithan Market, by the way, great market. You got to support that. I pumped gas at Boyle's gas station when I was a kid. That's another thing. The kids don't work nowadays. We all did. Well, anyway, but there's still a sense of bucolic nostalgia if you drive over towards Ardrossan Farm. You know, they still have some fields that the Montgomery Scots have kept going with the Black Angus and everything, and it's just beautiful. My family had to sell the property. I mean, there was no, and we didn't want to develop it into a Levittown or whatever, but in the late 50s, there was a lot of controversy about it. What are you going to do with the property? But, you know, we all were very comfortable financially, but, you know, when you've got a 300 some odd acre farm, you know, and when I was a kid, we had St. David's Golf Club was over there originally. There was a golf course. I remember as a little boy, some of you are old enough, Tunia is, we used to go sledding over where B. Altman's was, which is now Food Giant in the Micro Center. There was a big hill there, which isn't that big, but when we were kids, it looked big, and we used to all go sledding there. You know, so anyway, I'm sort of rambling, but I just wanted to try and just express, yes?
Yes, That's a delightful story. I just love hearing it. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more about William Penn and your connection there. I'd love to hear.
Oh, yes, yeah, okay. Well, I sort of neglected that part. Margot, my cousin, is more of an expert on that than I am. But we moved, my father inherited Cliveden, which you probably all know. It's our ancestral home in Germantown, which was built by Benjamin Chew. My probably great-grandfather, our great-grandfather, who was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, and he was William Penn's lawyer and one of his best friends. He went into voluntary exile or imprisonment during the Revolution because he didn't side, with either side really, and he went down and just didn't participate. He was a very brilliant man, obviously very scholarly. He had a legal collection that was unbelievable. He had one of the largest private law collections in the world. In fact, when my dad and the brothers and sisters were transferring the house over to the National Trust, we found a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the back of one of his law books. And Daddy thought, well, it's just a print. Well, it wasn't a print. And we sold it to Malcolm Forbes for, like $1 million. Now it would be worth 15 million probably. But anyway, Daddy inherited that house when he was 15 years old from his Uncle Sam, my great Uncle Sam, and with the provision that our great aunt, Elizabeth Bessie Chew, Aunt Bessie Chew, could live there for the duration of her life. Well, she lived to be, which is sort of spectacular, but she lived to be like 94, and she didn't die until 1959 or something. So then here my father was with this house, having built a house over where Lisa now lives in Radnor, and suddenly what are we gonna do with this house? You can't really sell a house with that kind of provenance. So over we go, and we moved in there. It was never my cup of tea. I just had such a great attachment to Radnor and Wayne, and I don't think my mom really liked it either, but nonetheless, we went there. And we fixed it up, and it looked very beautiful, and it was a great collection of antiques that we were lucky enough to have inherited. And we lived there until 1972, and then my father gave it to the National Trust. His brothers and sisters were all participants in that, Aunt Ann, Aunt Betty, Uncle John, and Uncle Ben. And it then became a National Trust property. It now is open to the public, and people go there. You can go and visit it. It's sadly not nearly as cozy and comfortable or elegant as it was when we lived there, but they're fabulous pieces of furniture. I mean, we have a Thomas Affleck Philadelphia sofa that's worth 10 or 20 million dollars. I mean, literally, and that was all given to the National Trust. And we were very happy to have them take it over, because otherwise, what are you going to do with that house? You can't. The Battle of Germantown took place there, and the actual battle precipitated General Washington's regrouping at Valley Forge, because Washington's troops were so badly depleted at the Battle of Germantown in October 7th of 1777, they were surprised by the British under General Howe and Colonel Musgrave, who had taken refuge in the house. And it was a foggy morning, and down they came, and Washington was massively attacked by the British. The British were inside the house, which had walls that were like 5 feet thick, and the cannons were not able to penetrate it. So that precipitated that regrouping. It's historically a very famous house, and I'm proud that the National Trust has it, but I frankly preferred Radnor and growing up on our beautiful farm. So, yes.
Could you describe, as a child, what the intersection of Radnor Chester Road and Lancaster Avenue looked like when you were 7 or 8 or 9 and walked there and lived there? What did that look like compared to what we see today?
Well, back in the 40s and 50s, Lancaster Pike, as we called it, was a 2-lane dirt highway practically. I mean, we had, I don't know whether any of you remember the Moo down in Villanova. That was a sort of a place to go get milkshakes. And there was a skating rink down there, Tunya, you remember it, a skating rink, and there was a Howard Johnson's right down there. That was all, and it was all country. It was bucolic. It was dirt. We have some pictures here somewhere, but that last one, that was right there. That was where, if you go around the corner, if you were going down under the train station in Radnor and you came around to go down to Lancaster Pike right here, that's what it looked like. That was Billy Patterson's house, and those houses on Radnor Way, and right there those were the barns, not the barns, but the stables, and we had truck gardens and everything. I mean, everything was, it was incredibly bucolic, really was. Any questions or comments or anything?
Sam, can you tell us the story when you went to Europe and you had an introduction to, I believe it was somebody's aunt?
Oh, yeah. Well, as I said, yeah, that's another topic, but nonetheless, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. A minister told me that years ago. I believe it so much. Warren Quo, Margaret, running into people, my next door neighbors, Bill and Susan Wheeler, God love you, I'm glad you're here. I think everything happens for a reason. I'm convinced of that. I'm going to be 80 in August. Too many things have happened that were not random. They were coincidental. Jeb Burden and I meeting. We met at a meeting at St. David's Church when I first moved back here, and I had been put on some really bad medications on Lexapro, which was an antidepressant because I'd had my hips replaced and I was really nervous and I wasn't sleeping, and I was hospitalized thanks to being put on the wrong medication. And I met you and you said, you got to go see my doctor and get off whatever it is you're on. So there you go. You never know. But yeah, all right, wait a sec. So anyway, I was at a debutante party years ago in Chestnut Hill in 1965, and I cut in and danced with this girl, a very pretty girl, and her name was Meg Davis, and she said, what are you doing this summer? I said, I'm going out to California. She said, well, what are you doing before that? I said, well, I'm actually going to Europe with this friend of mine, Phil Warner. She said, oh, if you're going to Europe, you've got to call up my aunt. So I said, okay, where does she live? And she said, she lives in the south of France. And I said, oh, fine, well, I'm going there. I'm going down to Provence, and I'm going to go down to, down to Saint-Tropez, and I'm going to go up to Monte Carlo and blah, blah, blah. So she gave me this number. This is a true story. So I got to the south of France, and my friend that I was with had to come back to Philadelphia, and I went down to the south of France, to Monte Carlo, and I drove up this long, winding road to this place, the likes of which I'd never seen, and I knocked on the door. And a gendarme came in full livery, and I said, hi. I was scared to death. I said, hi, I'm Sam Chu. He said, oh, yes, Mr. Chu, come in. So I go into a room that's about this size, but it was an atrium, sort of an aviary with plants and trees, and it didn't look like anyway, it was inside. And this woman came around the corner in gardening gloves and linen pants and a blouse, and I looked at her and she looked at me and she said, Sam, I've been expecting you. And I said, oh, Your Majesty. She said, Sam, knock it off. I'm Grace Kelly. I'm from Philadelphia. True story. I spent the weekend with Princess Grace and the Prince and their children in Monte Carlo. And they took me up to their little place, sadly, up on the road that when she was killed, very sadly. She was the sweetest, nicest woman. We played backgammon. We had more fun. And she just loved the fact that I was trying to be an actor and she'd been an actress. And she was absolutely delightful. And so were the children, and so was her husband. Her husband came in right after we were having lunch, and he came in, he had shorts on and he had an ace bandage on. I said, oh, Your Majesty. He said, stop it. And I said, what happened? He said, oh, I sprained my knee trying to get off the Royal Yacht the other night. I was going to go have a drink with some friends. So that was an incredible story. Princess Grace, can you imagine? Yes.
One rumor that I don't know whether you can put this to bed. Let's see, Benjamin Chu, the original Benjamin.
Yeah.
I understood when he got the land out here, the original land, even though he got 30,000 acres in Beaver County from William Penn.
Apparently.
That probably still owns some of that. But anyway, I understand he put up a toll gate across the road. when people were going to Lancaster.
I heard that. I don't know whether Margot or Lacey knows that, but that apparently is a true story. There were apparently at one point down on the corner of basically where the Radnor Hotel is, and on the corner of Radnor and Chester Road and Lancaster Pike, there was a toll gate, where at some point they charged people to pass through there. I find that that's a little strange. Anything else?
I'm trying to think of, from the conversations we had, some of the more interesting stories. I'd like to hear where you got your suit and your ties and who you bought your ties from.
Okay, well, this has nothing to do with Radnor, and we're here to talk about Radnor, which we all love. But I will tell you this is an amazing, talk about coincidences, God's way of remaining anonymous. This actually happened 2 weeks ago. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I couldn't make this up. I went up to New York. A friend of Kendall's daughters invited me up to New York to a very posh New York men's eating club called The Leash, which is sort of like the Racket Club in Philadelphia, but it's where people who fish and hunt go, and it's on 63rd and Park Avenue, right off Park Avenue. And I took the train up and I checked in, and then it was at 3:30 in the afternoon. I decided to go out and go for a walk down Park Avenue. Now, if you're up in the 60s and 70s on Park Avenue, you might run into somebody like all of you that you know who kind of looks familiar. And I did see one gentleman that I knew from Wall Street years ago. And then I was walking along, and I was about a distance from here to the end of the room, and there was a very attractive couple that came around the corner. This is, God is my witness, came around the corner, and they were walking towards me, and they were about the size of Steve Dittman right there, about 6'5". Yeah, Steve's tall. Well, this guy was about your size. And the man was very good looking. I presumed him to be about my age, and his wife was beautiful. She had a sort of a cardigan cable stitch sweater on and pearls, and they looked like they just stepped out of a catalog. So they were walking over, and he had a double-breasted blazer on. And I'm a clothes horse. You can see these are cars from the 50s right here. But anyway, I had a suit on, and I had a pink shirt. My father used to always wear pink shirts. It was sort of his standard uniform, and I did too. And I really liked them, pink shirts and a blazer and whatever. And he said you can always get by that way. So he walked towards me, and I said, "Oh, excuse me." I said, "I have to tell you, I love your double-breasted blazer." And he had a double-breasted blazer on. And he said, "Well, thank you very much." And I said, I had one of those. I bought it in 1964 in London on Savile Row, but it doesn't fit me anymore. And he said, "Well, why don't you have it let out?" And I said, "Well, I tried, and it didn't work." I took it up to the Tiger shop. Couldn't work. So he said, and then he said, "By the way, I like your pink shirt." Now, this is true. I said, "Oh, thank you." I said, "I'm not going to keep you, but there's a story to this shirt. I bought it in 1961 when I was in boarding school in Connecticut, and I used to love to go into New York, and I would go to Brooks Brothers and buy ties and shirts." This is a Brooks Brothers shirt. And I bought it from a guy, and he really liked me for some reason, because I was this little sort of Philadelphia preppy who liked preppy clothes. And I went in there the next year to buy another shirt and tie, and he wasn't there. And I'm telling this guy this story, and he looked at me, and he had a look on his face that was just so sweet, and he had a little tear come down his eye. And I said, I went in, and he wasn't there, and he said, "Tell me more." And I said, "Well, it turns out that he went out to rep," they called it. He said, "rep his own line of neckties." And I said, you want to know who he was?" And he said, "I know who he was because I'm his brother." And I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "I am Ralph Lipschitz's brother, Jerry." It was Ralph Lauren's brother. On the street, you see, that's what happens, as I say, if you go out and talk to people. I mean, is that a 1 in a billion coincidence? And I looked him up. He is. He took a picture and he sent it to Ralph. And Ralph went off and became Ralph Lauren. So things like that happen to all of us. We just have to expect a miracle, but don't ask for it, I guess. Yeah. Any
Questions from the audience?
Anything, or do you want me to shut up? Yes.
When I was a kid, I used to go picnic with my family on the Radnor Township Road, basically, Martha Brown's Woods.
Yes.
Martha Brown.
Martha Brown was that's where the money came from, as Margot said, because the Chews, had whatever they had, and Benjamin Chew was very prominent. But no, the Browns, David Sands Browns, the Browns, as I understand it, and I think I'm right, Margot might know better than me, but our grandmother was named Ann Thompson, and she was from Ballston Spa, New York, which is up near Saratoga. And that was her family. So it was her family, the Browns, Mary Brown and David Sands Brown, who had all that property before our grandmother married Benjamin Chew, our grandfather, and got all of that property.
Any other family stories we should hear?
I have a question. Where did you learn to fish? We have a picture of you fishing. Did you?
Well, I used to fish. I spent my summers in Prouts Neck, Maine, outside of Portland, on my mother's side of the family, where Winslow Homer lived, and it's a beautiful little place. And we used to go fishing up there off the rocks in Maine, fishing for bass and whatnot. But I started fly fishing really seriously when I lived in California, because very sadly, one of the few really sad events of my life was my first divorce, because my then wife and my adorable, wonderful son, who was now 52, they moved back east. She didn't like California, and they moved back east. So it was heartbreaking not to be able to participate in the raising of my son at that age, and to go to the football games and do all that. But we always were very, very close, and I was determined that I was going to, have a bonding with him. And he and I started camping and fishing and fly fishing all over the high Sierras and Wyoming and Oregon and Montana for many, many years, and we still do to this day, and we just adored it. It was a wonderful bonding and everything. So that's where I started, and I loved, and fly fishing is a very sort of a Zen-like experience. It's just very peaceful. So, yes.
I'm sitting next to Tony Heil.
I know, who I adore.
Giving some credence to you. The Coyote local is central to the history of the main line. Do you have any war stories about riding the Paoli?
Oh, I love the Paoli local, because we used to gape at all the girls. I took the Paoli local every day from Radnor down to Marion when I was at Episcopal for the first 7 years, and all the girls that went to Agnes Irwin and Shipley and whatever would be on the train. It was like a big social thing being on the Paoli local. It was wonderful. Yeah. And in those days, all the, we have such great schools, by the way, here. We have to all remember that. My God, Conestoga, Radnor. Listen, if I was my father, I wouldn't pay $40,000 a year to send me to Episcopal. It's not a worthwhile investment. But Conestoga, Radnor, Harriton, Lower Merion, fabulous schools we're blessed with. And then Episcopal, Haverford. Yeah, the Paoli local was great.
Sam, thank you. I'm really enjoying your story. I didn't grow up around here. I've worked as a librarian in Radnor for over 30 years. But I do remember maybe 10 years ago, on Lancaster, on the street, probably the Rite Aid was there, but I don't think it was open yet, but I met this heavy-set guy. He was a wonderful man. We became friends. And then we connected in other ways, but heavy-set, and his name was John Chew.
He wasn't that heavy set. Well, yeah, he was my cousin. Yeah, my first cousin.
Were you related to him?
Yes, first cousin.
Oh, I
Yeah.
miss him.
He was wonderful. Yeah, he really was. We were very blessed, Margot and I and Lisa. There were 8 cousins. We all grew up on the farm together, and we were very, very close, and we loved each other so much.
And he lived in those condos.
He did, yes. Yeah.
And I was at the party there.
Yeah.
He lived upstairs, he came downstairs, and I said,
Yeah.
John! And he ended up coming to the library for no reason, stopped in and said hi to me, gave me a photograph.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I go I told you I belong to the Italian American Club. Where's Mr. Danny Cantonio? Is he still here? Stand up and take a bow. Everybody knows Tammy Cantonio. Oh, God bless you. The best shoe store in the world, and we're all heartbroken that it closed down. I urge all of you, by the way, to boycott the King of Prussia Mall. Occasionally I'll go to Wegmans, but you know what? We have to support our local stores here. The Tiger Shop, all of the stores here. Tammy Cantonio's, I'm so sorry to see go by the way, but you were such an important part of this community. And of course, Warren, the Quos, and by the way, there's a great sushi place up by the farmer's market. I can't remember the name of it, but it's fabulous. Sushi Hami, yeah. And also, any of you who want, men or women, are welcome to come. I go every Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday morning. We go to the farmer's market, and there are a bunch of old fogies, and we all sit there and talk about the good old days and what illnesses we're getting. And I've stopped going to doctors, I've decided. I'm going to tell you a little bit. I really have. Because you know what? Every time you go to a doctor, they find something else, and they'll say, you know, and I went to the doctors 14 years ago, and they said, oh, you've got prostate cancer, but don't worry, something else will kill you before that. I said, well, that's really reassuring. Well, fortunately, I got over it. Now I'm done with doctors. So, you know, we have to live every day and laugh and be happy and be good to our neighbors and our children and just have a wonderful, wonderful life, which I wish everybody here. Any other questions, or shall I? Elsie's signaling me to get off.
No, yeah. I think that's a fantastic sentiment to close on, Sam. We really appreciate hearing your stories of Radnor. We hope that in the future, you know, that there'll be more events over the course of the next year, and we'll have another forum where maybe we can find you and some more folks around your age that grew up in Radnor, and we can listen to a conversation.
And be sure and go, you know, don't forget our beautiful hardware store down here. And we have a great John's Hoagie shop in Wayne. I mean, we have a lot of great things here. You know, places to go and places to support. Anybody remember Wax Drugstore besides me? There you go. Wax Drugstore and Parks Hardware. And how about Harrison's? Harrison's Clothing Store. Oh, I missed that. Yeah. Well, Bill, go get a glass of wine, free wine.
Sam?
Bill and Susan Wheeler, my next door neighbors, who I love.
Sam?
We would like to thank Sam for doing this for us tonight, bringing everybody out there. Thank you, yes. So we tried to come up with the best movie-themed, TV-themed, Philadelphia-themed gift we could come up with. And we were very generous in that, we were very lucky in that the artist who did this donated several copies to us, and we thought it would be perfect for Sam to have. So there you go, my friend.
Oh my God. Thank you, sweetie.
Thank you.
Well, just one quick thing. That started my interest. I remember seeing Quo Vadis and King Solomon's Mines right here at the Wayne Movie Theater when I was a little boy, and my cousin Dick Barringer, Margot's husband, brother, we used to go there, and we would usually sit up on the balcony. We'd sit up there because we had a better view, and we loved going to the movies, and I hope they reopen our Wayne Movie Theater one of these days. Thank you. God bless all of you. Good health and good happiness, and keep supporting our beautiful community here of Wayne and Radnor. Lots of love.